Welcome back to today's episode of the Everyday Leader podcast. We're so excited to be bringing on Eric Upchurch and really get to hear his story, his time in leadership in his military career, and now his successful career in real estate, where he also has created a community to serve, give back, and teach and lead veterans who are making that transition out of the military and want to get into real estate. So some amazing lessons he shares that he's learned along the way, and we've really just scratched the surface of his insights today. Excited to bring this episode to you.
Welcome to the Everyday Leader podcast. Leadership is a choice. Join me, Matt, and my co-hosts Drew and Tate each episode as we break down how to lead powerfully in your family, team, and organization.
Welcome to the Everyday Leader podcast. We are super excited to have Eric Upchurch with us today. He's an Army Special Operations veteran, and he's now helping the military community invest in real estate and educating them, and has really grown and done some incredible things in that space. And we're excited to have him on here a little bit about his journey and lessons he's learned in leadership along the way. And Eric, thanks for taking some time out of your busy schedule to jump on here with us today. We really appreciate
excited to be here. Glad to be here, guys.
Yeah. So maybe for our listener who doesn't know who you are, could you give us the brief history of Eric and tell them a little bit about yourself?
Yep, sure. So grew up in central Iowa, actually graduated a semester early from high school to move out to California with a buddy of mine, and ended up accidentally going to college because my girlfriend at the time's mom signed me up for junior college. Transferred to UC Santa Barbara. After graduating there, where I started actually dating my wife, I didn't know what I was going to do. Like a lot of people still, even with a college degree, I had no idea. So most of the men on my dad's side had been in law enforcement of some kind. And maybe it's just part of my blood or whatever, but growing up, my dad was like, don't be a cop, don't get in law enforcement. It's just, you'll end up cynical and, crusty and mad at everybody and whatever. So what I do, start headed down to the recruiting offices in Santa Barbara. And I, I was just curious kind of, more than anything. And I didn't want to kick doors down. I kind of just wanted to serve and see if I could lead. I mean, kind of on par for this podcast. And I'd always been a leader kind of inadvertently. And I'd love to talk about that a little bit later, and so I was like, well, maybe the military. So I went to the Coast Guard. I was like, well, Coast Guard, nobody gets hurt in the Coast Guard, right? I'll go in the Coast Guard and see how that goes. So Coast Guard wasn't taking anybody. And then they're like, go to the Navy. So I went to the Navy. Navy wasn't Air Force wasn't taking anybody. I didn't want to go into the Marine Corps because they're all grunts, and I didn't want to do that. So no offense, Marines. But just wasn't what I wanted to do. I wanted to, I thought at the time I want to use my education and go, do something technical or whatever. So I joined Army Aviation, and I was just a trade. I was by trade, it was aircraft structural repair. So I thought I was just going to go fix helicopters. That was my plan. And I chose to be enlisted instead of becoming an officer, because if I chose to be enlisted, because if you have a degree, you're usually just an officer, right? But I chose to be enlisted because it paid off all of my college debt immediately. So huge score there, tens of thousands in debt, and it was just gone. And so anyway, ended up as a specialist at E4 in the Army, and I was just trying to make it to my wedding in time. And so I ended up on the top of my class because I didn't make anybody mad. I passed all my tests. I was top of my class. So I got selected for special operations by accident, just trying to make it to my wedding. I knew that if I missed anything, if I messed up at all, sprained an ankle, pissed off a drill sergeant, anything, I would have missed my wedding in Santa Barbara 6 months later. So I was, as we say, a squared away soldier, and ended up in my whole career in the military and special operations. That's it. And then, started kind of, investing in real estate a little bit. I bought a house fully leveraged with the VA loan in 2006, just to live in. And we lived there for 4 years, 5 years, my wife and I. And then when I moved back to California, when I got out of the military, couldn't sell it. So we rented it. And then that was my kind of, oh, dang, now I'm a landlord. What is that all about? And then I started just thinking about what that means. And then I read books and figured out what more I can do with that. And then here we are. So that's kind of brief, but yeah.
Awesome. Yeah, I guess what like why real estate? I guess you maybe accidentally became a landlord, but what made you decide, yeah, I want to kind of pursue this? And then maybe the second question to that is, then what made you decide, hey, I want to go back to the military and help them and invest in real estate?
Yeah, so I can tie a lot of this together, but why real estate? I did kind of fall into it like a lot of military folks do when you PCS, when you ETS or PCS. PCS is moving from one installation to the next. You get your next duty assignment and you go there. But I never, because I was in the unit I never had to do that. I was at Hunter Army Airfield for the whole time in service. When I got out, went back to the Bay Area, San Francisco Bay Area, not cheap place to live. So I was kind of like head on a swivel. Maybe I can't quite yet buy a house. We ended up a couple years later being able to buy a house. But I was always looking around. I was reading. I went to like the hook, line, and sinker free 90 minute training, that I heard on the radio, I think at the time, like in San Jose, like learn how to do tax liens. I was like, well, it's free. Let's go, And so I was always just kind of curious, but I think why real estate, once I kind of understood that it could potentially provide some freedom of some kind, I was looking at it more of like a deeper introspective, like what is life about? And some of that came from my military service. I buried my comrades. I deployed 5 times to combat. And so I really did a lot of work, a lot of thinking of like, why am I here? What are we doing here? What's the purpose? And, kind of to answer that now, it really just boils down to joy, love, joy, whatever. Like we're just peons. We're little ants in this blip of time that's really in the magnitude of what Earth is and time is. It's meaningless. It's nothing. And I don't mean to sound dark. This is like, take yourself out of your body for a minute and think about this concept. But like this time doesn't matter. Like you can be the most famous person in the world ever, and in 100 years, no one cares. So if that's the case, do I need to change the world? Do I need to feel significant? No, not really. But what we as humans need, and this is where I'm tying this back to real estate, I guess, is like, I was thinking, well, what's my time worth? Like, why am I actually here? It can't be to slave away in an office for 45 years. I hold both of my parents say, don't do that. So if they're saying that, there's got to be more. And so it was like, so now how can I achieve more moments of joy? How can I spend more quality time with the people around me? How can I make great memories with my kids, my spouse, my friends? Because in 90 years, the only thing that will matter is who's standing around my hospital bed as I die, if I'm so lucky. That's it. No one will remember a dang thing else. Nothing. You can't, no one saw a U-Haul behind a hearse, right? You're not taking any of it with you. You can pass it along, but even in 2 generations, your grandkids won't care that you existed. It's fine. That sounds like dark. Maybe that's the military part of me, but like, it's just the truth. So enjoy the moments. And so real estate is a thing that I was like, well, I'm interested. It's fascinating. It keeps me moving all the time. There's always some new exit strategy. There's always some new problem or challenge to tackle. There's always some new opportunity to grow or learn something new or make more money or whatever. And it's abundant. Like it will never stop. And so I was like, well, I can get behind this, And I see that thousands of people, especially Drew, you and I know, like these people, we're going to conferences all the time. Like there is no shortage of real estate deals. I don't care who's out there saying, oh, I can't find a deal right now, dude. Don't say that. You just gotta get more creative and or be more patient. So it was that, and like that was also a perfect thing for me coming out of the military to I say in kind of just layman's terms, like keep out of my head. Like I needed to kind of be busy also. And so it was like, oh yeah, I can hold down a W-2 and I can do this real estate thing on the side and learn and build teams and build a company and do all this stuff. And it was good for me, to be honest. Like real estate was an outlet for me to go and feel like I'm accomplishing something. And let me tell you this too. I'm just going to keep rambling until you interrupt me, because this is like so much fun to kind of reflect on this for me. It's like the reason a military member needs a transition point, like I needed real estate. Like you might need to be part of a club or to be engaged in, community activities if you're coming out of the military or something. But the reason military members fail as veterans is because think about what you get from the armed services when you're in. You get to a uniform, meals, housing. You know where to be when you're well trained. You have safety and control well in hand. That is all just bundled up and inherently given to you, and kind of trained into you, right? And then on top of that, you've got serotonin, oxytocin, dopamine, epinephrine, like this chemical cocktail. Like every time someone says your name, if I say Drew, you get an endorphin spike, whether you like it or not, right? So in the military, what do they give you? They give you a ribbon or a badge or some kind of thing that you did, or your commander comes in and gives you a pat on the back and says, "Hey, great mission, good job this week. We got to do this next week." All of that stuff is crazy influential on your chemistry, to the point where highest recorded levels of cortisol in humans is military service members. That's the stress hormone. So not a great one to have, but like all of those things your body gets hooked on in the military. So now you get out of the military. What do you have? It's like hitting a brick wall. It's withdrawal. So a veteran who's self-destructive is going through withdrawal. That's all it is. They don't have a direction. No one's telling them where to be, when, what to look like, to be shaven or not shaven, to wear a suit or not wear a suit. Can I wear a hoodie to this interview? Doesn't matter. Like all of these things are it's a mystery. Civilians aren't predictable. The war is predictable because you're trained. But civilian world is not predictable. And then you don't have serotonin is like the camaraderie drug, right? It's like I belong to this tribe. That's why we go to conferences, Drew, right? It's like, these are my people,
Find
right?
your people.
I can like totally relate to these. That's why we join masterminds, because we're like looking for a new tribe of people. So then oxytocin, the love drug, and like all of these things are just what your body wants and needs. And the military gives it to you in droves. But when you get out, you don't have it. So then you end up doing destructive behavior, ruining relationships, getting in bar fights, alcoholism and drug abuse, getting arrested, or suicide. Those are all results of chemical withdrawal from the things you had in the military. It's not the veteran's fault if they don't recognize that that's what's happening. And sometimes that happens 10 years down the road, not necessarily immediately. So real estate, to me, tying it back in, was like a way, because I was in therapy for 3 years when I got out of the service. Real estate was a way for me to just be like, well, I got something to give, and I can find a tribe, and I can help other military members do something with their life, and that makes me feel fulfilled. So great. So second part of your question was, why am I helping back military members now? 2 reasons. One, because it serves me well. So call it selfish. I get to help other military members and like kind of get that hit of like, hey, we're creating our tribe. We're helping our tribe. We speak the same language. Well, we speak English, we speak real estate, and we speak military. And that's a super hyper niche within a niche, which is fantastic. And then secondly, I've always, as a leader, I've always been somebody, and I didn't choose this. This is like one of those things that you either have or don't, or, it's part of your personality maybe, but I love to take information and digest it into something smaller and then present it to people. So that's just a very basic way. Like first time I read Rich Dad, Poor Dad or Total Money Makeover by Dave Ramsey, I absorbed that information, read it a couple times, highlighted a book, and then I rewrote it into like 1-page document that I could share with as many people as possible. So I think a good leader
do it.
So I think a good leader has that like inherent kind of need to like, dude, no, you don't have to do it. You don't have to do it that way. Like, let me show you the shortcut. Like, just do it this way. I did it this way. It worked. And then if we do it together, we can go faster, farther, you know? So yeah, I think that was 7,000 words of answering both your questions.
No, that's awesome. Thanks for sharing that, Eric. And honestly, like, I know you said, hopefully this doesn't sound dark, and I don't think it does, and I don't think that our listeners feel that way, because it really is so true. I've reflected on that many times, that sometimes we get really caught up in like the consequences of our current actions or inaction in the long term. And while it matters, to your point, it's like, yeah, in 100 years, like no one really knows you or whatever. And so, thank you for sharing that. What else can you say as far as like how intentional or how present was like leadership on your mind during these like decisions, transitions, and what you've created, which sounds really remarkable? Was it something that was just, you kind of mentioned like you're just always been that way? Or were you really thinking like, I want to be a leader, I want to take the lead?
That's a great question. I don't think I've really thought about that too much, but the answer came right to my head immediately when you asked. So usually the idea of am I leading or how do I lead or I should lead is an afterthought. I think it's more of like a you're drawn to it. Like when I was 12 years old, working in the cornfields in Iowa in the summer. That's what every Iowa kid does. We go out and detassel corn. You know, we like pull the tops of the corn off so it can fertilize and whatever. And I ended up as a crew team leader because I was always like trying to make sure that the row was right and that we didn't miss any tassels. And somebody saw that, some adult saw that and was probably like, "Oh, Eric, you should walk behind 4 rows and make sure that your whole team is working a certain way." And I'm like, "Sure, okay. How much can I get a pay raise for that?" Or sounds good. I was just trying to save up enough money for a moped at that point. Um, and so and then it was, I ended up being the manager of a coffee shop, the manager of a retail store, a clothing store. I was the manager most of the time. I mean, I can't even remember a job that I ever had from 12 years old up that I didn't end up being at least a supervisor of some kind. So I think thinking about it in like, oh, am I managing or am I a supervisor or am I a leader, is usually just like an afterthought that I can then go, okay, now I'm in this position. How can I get good at it? Like, how can I actually affect the people who are working here? And how can I make things and systems kind of more efficient? So yeah, I feel like the best leaders don't have to work hard at it, but they can work at refining it once they're in the position. They don't have to work hard at getting the position, is what I mean.
Yeah.
They should just like your commanders and stuff, like in the military, I was moving up through the ranks as literally as fast as you possibly could according to Army regulations. And that's because I was squared away. I was there all the time, where I was supposed to be, doing the right things. And my commanders were like, that's a squared away guy. Like, he needs to move up to the next rank because we have more responsibility that he needs to handle. Yeah. And so I think people are drawn to it. Like, the best leaders out there are just drawn to it.
Can you think back to like when you were younger, what maybe influenced that in you? I don't know that we need to get into a whole discussion like, are leaders born or are they made? Maybe that's for another time. And can you think of like specific people that influenced you or experiences you had that helped you see like, or step into or have the identity around like, I take the lead or I'm a leader?
Man, I can't think of, the only thing I could think of is like the work ethic of my mom and dad or something. But like that doesn't directly translate probably. My dad was a deputy sheriff, so he was in a supervisory role. But that's kind of different. Like, I don't know. I don't think there was one thing for me I was just always kind of drawn to like what more responsibility. And part of that comes to like that breakdown of information. If I see a management cell doing something that seems discombobulated, I'm like, I'm going to go figure out like why they're doing it that way. And I'm also really opinionated, so that sometimes it's actually been abrasive for me in jobs. Like right when I got to my unit, the first thing they said to me was, "Don't open your mouth." And they didn't even know me, but they were like, because I came in as an E4, I skipped 3 ranks because I had a college degree. And so they knew like that I'm like this college kid coming in, and I was probably going to have a bunch of new ideas and stuff. And they're like, I remember my squad leader, Staff Sergeant Mello, said, do not talk. We will ask for your opinion when we need it. And I'm like, dang, okay. And it's not like a job that if you're like working as a cook where you can just mouth off and say something. Like, they can dock your pay or put you in jail if you're being insubordinate enough, So, yeah, I think that, I don't know. Yeah, I don't know. It's an interesting question. Interesting thought.
Well, no, it is fascinating, and I do believe. You mentioned your parents. I really believe that had more of an impact, maybe than you could even see.
Yeah, probably.
Because that's one of the things that we believe is like what is modeled to our kids is huge. Like is everything. Like, and it means so much more than what we even say or teach, quote unquote, right? So, no, that is awesome. We had an experience recently during a mastermind call when someone shared, we were talking about like identity, and one of the things that someone shared was like this concept around like, hey, for me and in our family, like we talk about, we are willing to take the lead. And it just like, I mean, I've been talking about leadership for years now, right? We have a whole podcast and everything about it. And it just like punched me in the face in a good way. Like, yeah, like that's part of who I am. And it sounds like that's exactly part of who you are too. Like all the stories you're telling and the experiences you're sharing, it's like you were willing to take the lead. And anyways, I just think that matters to like recognize that and then feed that and then help other people see like you can choose that too yourself if you want. So I think it's amazing. I think it's what's being demonstrated here.
And I'll say too, like I leaders are great unless they're not, but also followers are amazing. Like I don't want somebody to think like, oh, like you're not as valuable if you're not a leader. That's not even it. Like without followers, you have no leaders, right? And like followers to me isn't a derogatory term. I'm just using it as like leaders need someone to lead, and followers are the most important people. That's where the rubber meets the road, right? That's where the work gets done. And so those people can take charge and really think of it as a leadership, like lead yourself or lead your job or lead your efforts or, improve and all that stuff in a similar 100%. Aspect without some title that maybe that we're framing here, but like leaders need great followers. And so it's just as important to have people who understand that they have a good leader. And honestly, one of the most important things that I do for everybody that I lead, is to, one, get out of their way, but also two, make sure that they understand that I'm working for them. I think that's like all I'm doing day in, day out is trying to figure out a way how to get them more pay, how to get them more security, how to get them, get problems off their plate that they can't seem to get off their own. If there's some other element in there that I can help with. And then, I have this Lao Tzu quote up on my board, but a leader's best when people barely know he exists. When his work is done, his aim complete, people will say, we did it ourselves. That's the best. When you're just kind of not there.
Yeah, no, like so much alignment there with what we believe and what we're trying to promote through our message, which is that like leadership has nothing to do with your role or title or position or experience or age or gender. It's a choice. So I love that. Like that's great.
One thing I've heard you say a couple times now, Eric, and it seems like it's a through line that's kind of coming through your message, but this idea that you'd love to take information and package it in a way where it's a shortcut for others. We talk a lot about that leadership is helping others get what they want, or leadership is helping someone see maybe something they can't see on their own. Right. Talk a little more about that, like how that's come up in your life, or what you've learned from others, and kind of how leaders create shortcuts.
Yeah, I didn't even realize it until I think it was the Dave Ramsey example I gave. I read Total Money Makeover, and I was like, okay, there's all these like steps in this 200-page book that I'm supposed to do, and I'm like, why isn't this like on a worksheet? Where I can just go, because like in the military, it's just like everything's a checklist. It's just like, oh, like literally 10 million people have done this before me. This isn't some rockets, and this correlates completely to real estate, right? It's like millions of people have done this before. I'm not doing anything unique. So give me a checklist and I'll just follow the checklist And at the end, I'll get the desired result that everyone else got. Like, why don't you just provide me that instead of giving me some complicated, text that I have to figure out? So I started with that, and I just broke it down into like the snowball expense worksheet, and then like the baby steps 1 through whatever, and started giving it to people. And they were like, "Can you teach this on our webinar at our company?" And I'm like, "Yeah, I guess, sure." But I did it for me, like originally I did it for me. And so when we started active duty passive income, it was literally just us. It was myself and Markian, my partner, and we were just trying to tell our military brothers and sisters anything that we had learned. And it started really by sharing that you can buy a fourplex with a VA loan with no money down, just the same as you can with a single family property. But no realtors out there. Well, I'm saying this, some realtors are going to be like, "Yeah, I tell it people all the time." But 15 years ago, realtors were in Savannah, Georgia, and everywhere else, small town USA, were not telling military members to go buy a fourplex. The one didn't tell. They told me to go buy a new construction house in the new part of town. They didn't tell me to buy a fourplex. Had I known with my new wife, no kids, that I could buy a fourplex with no money out of pocket, I would have done that. But no one told me how to do it. So we were just like, we got to teach the military how to do this. It's ridiculous that people don't know this. So we wrote Military House Hacking, and that kind of started our company and just been able to build the online education community that we have.
That's awesome. So cool. Yeah, it's not rocket science.
Nope.
Right? Like I love that. And there's just so much here. Like your willingness to just share what you've experienced and what you've learned. Again, I think that it goes back to just not everyone has that kind of view of themselves as like, oh, I can take the lead, or I can be a leader in that term, like by sharing what I know or sharing my experience or sharing what's beneficial to other people. And so how have you seen leaders grow around you? Like by your willingness to do that, what have you seen other people like take from that and then like step up or step into their own leadership and their own confidence or their own willingness to like share what they feel like is valuable with others?
Yeah, I mean, I've seen it where, even just taking leadership over your family life, like you don't have to be a leader of a company, be a leader in your household, male or female, doesn't matter at all. Just take leadership of your finances, take leadership of organizing your week, take leadership over your health, your family's health, anything like that. So there's that, but then also like on the business side, watching people almost like just have a light bulb moment of like, well, I am a leader. Like, wow. And it's like the first time someone reads Rich Dad, Poor Dad, they kind of have like a light bulb, like, oh, geez, like you're enlightened for a minute. You're like, something just clicks on. You're like, I had no idea that so many people were doing this with intention. Okay, now I'm not on this island by myself in thought. Same thing with leadership. I feel like sometimes people just need that moment where somebody goes, you can be a leader. Like you are a leader. Look at what you're doing right now. So recognition and just kind of awareness sometimes is enough for people to really take the bull by the horns and go, I am a born leader, or I'm an interested leader willing to work on it. One of those two.
Yeah.
Did that realization ever come at some point for you? Like, or did it come over time as you were in those various roles and leadership positions?
Yeah, I don't think I even thought about my like interest or yearning for leadership until I left the military. I never really reflected. So when I got out of the military, I was 31, and I really had never reflected and thought about ages 12 to 31 about the jobs that I had been in and why I was choosing to do them the way I was. So yeah, I think it was more along the lines of when I started my family and started thinking about business more. I was like, who am I? A lot of like soul searching and like, what am I all about? Why am I here? What's going on? And then I started realizing like there's a pattern that, like really understanding my personality. And even for me to be able to say, look, I'm super opinionated. I'm almost never going to not throw something in there. If somebody says something I think is off, I'm going to tell them like in the most tactful way I can, what's on my mind about it. I think we should all be sharing stuff. So I had to like, even something like that, I had to learn like, okay, Eric, sometimes dial it down. You can be a little opinionated and it comes off a little rough sometimes, but yeah, sometimes it comes off a little Asperger's-y when I'm speaking my mind with a military tone. so so again, some of that comes down to awareness, but yeah, I didn't really, there wasn't like a moment for me. It was kind of just a progression of well, like I said, I buried 6 of my friends as the burial detail non-commissioned officer in charge. So every time we'd lose somebody, either in accident or in combat, we'd take them to their final resting place, and then, but I couldn't seek behavioral health specialists, psychiatrists while I was in, because I would then anyway I would lose my security clearance, because you can't have a mental problem if you're in special operations. So when I got out, I was like, okay, I need to like go see if there's something wrong. I didn't feel like there was anything wrong, but you see homeless people out there all the time who probably 20 years ago didn't think there was something wrong. At least this was my thought process. And so I was like, well, maybe that's me in 20 years if I don't go get checked out. So anyway, it was like 3 years in therapy at the VA, uncovered a lot of like interesting things that, and I had to like learn, wow, how do I react in these circumstances? It's different than it was before the military, that's for sure. So, yeah, I think that's, to answer, is kind of just like, yeah, kind of not a moment, but a gradual progression of understanding who I am.
My impression of you, Eric, is that you see yourself as a leader. I feel like a lot of people struggle to say that, or maybe even struggle to feel that way about themselves. Like, what has that done, just viewing yourself that, or having that belief in yourself that, hey, I'm a leader and I can help people?
In a weird way, it forces, at least for me, it forces humility. And that sounds like kind of backwards, but I don't want to be somebody who is seen. I know that in certain circles, I'm seen as an authority of a thing, but I don't want it to be, I don't want those words to be thrown around, lightly. I don't want it to, like, I'm opinionated. I'm loud about certain things, and I tell people how, and I help them get right to the chase. Like, let's just get it done. Let's go execute this thing. And that, to some people, that's leadership, but it also allows me to reflect and go, okay, well, if I'm a leader in this position, my wife does a great job about this also. If you have a spouse who can put you in your place, sometimes it's fantastic. But maintaining a level of humility and just going like, I'm not perfect. I need to listen to that feedback, or my opinion isn't always the right opinion, right? It's just my opinion. And so obviously I think that's something for everybody that we work on a regular basis, but even like something as small as like, my wife looked at my social media and a few years ago, and she's like, you post a lot of like business stuff on there. Like, you should put some family stuff, like something that makes you a little bit more human. And I was like, I've really thought about that. So now I kind of try and ingrain like, oh, Eric's a human, he has teenage boys and, like, he has a family. He's been married for 20, I've been married 20 years. And like, I want people to know that, so yeah.
That's awesome, man. Well, thanks so much. This has been, it's been so good. To wrap up, a couple things. First of all, if you were going to try to just throw out maybe like 2 or 3 of the most like foundational like concepts for leadership for you, what would you throw out there? Words or like concepts to just wrap up how you view leadership?
I would say lead with a giving heart. Think about we'll just say, for lack of a better term, think about your subordinates, the ones you are leading, whether it's employees or friends or family or military comrades, whoever it is. Give first. Think about their needs. If you put their needs first, your job will not only be easier, but your team will be more successful. They will have higher morale, and morale is what either wins or loses battles in business or in war. So treat your subordinates like gold, and everything will come together eventually.
Yeah, that's awesome. Well, thanks so much for sharing your insights and your experiences, Eric. It's really inspiring. Where can our listeners find you if they want to just follow along with your journey? And
you can go to activedutypassiveincome.com, ericupchurch.com, or social media.
Okay, we'll make sure to put those links in the show notes so you can you can find Eric. And I guess one last question, Eric will ask you if you were to talk to somebody, or if we have a listener that's just, hey, I want to be a leader, just in my everyday life, what advice would you give somebody that's trying to maybe step into that?
Yeah, I think a success formula for anything you want is to learn all you can about a topic or a situation, present yourself well. So you have to have kind of general knowledge and learn the language of whatever you're trying to lead, whatever niche you're trying to lead in. Network your butt off, like at least you and I do, Drew. You know, you got to go out and be known in a certain circle. If you want to be known as a leader, you have to be known. So learn, network, add value to others. The way you become and are perceived as a leader is to give opinions, give thoughts, be a thought leader. I hate that term nowadays, but go out there and like teach people things and help people solve problems. So learn, network, add value. And then the last one is take action. You've got to get out there. All the rest of it is garbage unless you go do things, and you're going to fail, but fail forward. Just don't fail on your butt. Okay. So keep on moving forward. I teach my kids this all the time. Like, you're going to fail over and over and over again, but every single time you do, you get one step closer to being that leader that you've had in the past, that you loved, or that you really aspire to be in the future. So learn, network, add value, take action. If you do those 4 things with the intention to be 1% better as a leader every day, success will find you. Success will hunt you down.
So good. Thanks, man.
Awesome. No, appreciate that, Eric. I feel like just watching Matt's reaction to some of the things you said as we've been talking, or like, man, we could probably dive off on some of these topics for hours with you. So
next time.
Love the alignment. Love your thoughts. A lot of it's just what we believe and talk about with people.
Awesome.
People every day. So
good work, guys.
Yeah, appreciate you for coming on. And to our listeners, like I said, go back and re-listen to this. You'll pick up a ton of nuggets that Eric dropped throughout the way. And we encourage you to look for ways to be a leader in your home and in your life. And today's the day.
Thanks, guys.
Thanks for joining us on the Everyday Leader podcast. If you're ready to take your leadership journey even further, subscribe to our weekly newsletter for more insights and practical tips. And don't forget to connect with us on Instagram to stay a part of our growing community. Just follow the links in the show notes. If this episode impacted you, please help us spread the word and share the link with a friend from wherever you're listening.